Good morning. It's good to be back with you after a little break that I've taken. Although, truth be told, I'd rather be back in Paros with my family. Here we are, 2 weeks ago. There we are in Paros. My wife Tracy, my teens Jack and Emily upstairs. We went to both Paris and Paros, the Greek island, where we celebrated my 50th birthday. Our 21-year wedding anniversary, Jack's upcoming 18th birthday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, St. Patrick's Day, Halloween, and Groundhog Day and every other celebration I could pack into there because I could never afford to do this again. It was a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and God's timing is always absolutely perfect. If you were to follow me, or do follow me on Strava and on Insta, you would be like, oh my goodness, Derek is living his best life now. But what you won't see in my feed is that a week before we left, I was the closest to breakdown and burnout that I've ever been in my entire life. In the last, you're praying. In the last 12 months, Tracy and I have so often looked at each other and just said, the trials are relentless. I'm not going to go into all the details, a couple broad strokes, just some high-level stuff. September last year, my sister Lauren moved back from Portugal to move in with my parents. She had stage 4 cancer. 3 weeks later, we put down my Airedale of my friend of 12 years. A week later, Lauren passed away. That was just the beginning. And I'm not going to talk about all the things that we went through in that period and what we're still going through now. There's stuff, there's other stuff, there's struggles, there's heartache. But these are still things I'm waiting on God for miracles for. Many in this room can identify when I say the waves have been constant. The waves have been constant. But I'm also not going to assume for a second that I get the brownie. Do you remember that movie Notting Hill? The older folk and the crowd will remember it, when they're all sitting around the dinner table and there's one brownie left and they start to share their stories because the saddest person in the room gets the brownie. And it ends up being the most outwardly successful, the most beautiful person at the table. As Julia Roberts, playing Anna Scott, shares her story, she gets the brownie. The most unexpected person is the saddest person at the table. How unhappy are you? Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player who struts and frets his hour upon the stage and is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Look at that view on life. He struts and frets his hour upon the stage, signifying nothing. Is life a tragedy? In one of his last songs, Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of the rock band Queen, he asks this question, does anybody know what we are living for? In spite of the fact that he had amassed a huge fortune, he had attracted thousands of fans. Freddie admitted in an interview shortly before his death in 1991 that he was desperately lonely and sad. He said, you can have everything in the world and still be the loneliest man. You can have everything, but and that is the most bitter type of loneliness. Success has brought me world idolization and millions of pounds, but it's prevented me from having the one thing we all need, a loving, ongoing relationship. If we're living for success, that's pretty bleak, right? If we believe that success is the good life, the happy life, then that's kind of gutting to hear. Because when we start out in life, when we're starry-eyed little kids, we think happiness is natural. I mean, as a child, you see that they're unhappy people, but you figure they must have screwed up. Then as we get older, Unless we've been unusually protected, we hear from parents, from teachers, from other people, from the media, well, that life is tough, that it's unpredictable. But we kind of believe, right? We believe that if we work hard enough, that if we're good enough, if we're clever enough, if we're moral enough, we can have the good life. As we experience more of life, we realize happiness isn't as easy as we thought. And after a while, we realize that the most successful people, the most educated, the most gifted people are also the most cynical, the most pessimistic, the most skeptical about the prospect of contentment. Is life more of a comedy than a tragedy, or more of a tragedy than a comedy? In a comedy like Notting Hill, the guy always gets the girl, right? In comedies, at the end, everybody comes together and sings a happy song. Every obstacle is overcome. The crowd applauds the unlikely hero as the curtain comes down or as the credits roll, in the assumption that they'll all live happily ever after, the fairy tale ending. But in the tragedy, everybody dies disappointed in the last scene. We need the comedy to get through life, the beautiful, warm, fuzzy stories, the wonderful stories. But when you watch Macbeth, or Romeo and Juliet, or West Side Story, or The Kite Runner, or Lord of the Flies, or Dead Poets Society, or 13 Reasons Why, you realize you're actually looking into a mirror of what life is actually like. What life is actually like. You'll be happy to know I've titled my message, Living Your Best Life, because there's an ancient text with a story about a guy who's found the key to happiness. Let's read together Psalm 1. Blessed is the one who does not walk in step with the wicked, or stand in the way that sinners take, or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields fruit in its seasons, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Not so the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked leads to destruction. Psalm 1. Psalm 1 is known as the gatekeeper of the Bible. It basically summarizes all of the Psalms. Its principles are basic to the whole Bible, to everything in the Bible. It's a mini Sermon on the Mount, which was only given 1,000 years later. Jesus, when he gives the Sermon on the Mount, he basically gives a full exposition of Psalm 1. It draws a massive contrast between the way of blessing and the opposite. The first 3 verses describe the blessed person, and the last 3 verses describe the wicked person. And today I'm going to focus on the blessed person, and no, next week I'm not going to be focusing on the wicked person because nobody would come. Psalm 1 was written about 2,900 years ago, most likely by David. It's very famous. It's probably the most famous ancient text in the whole world. But as Tim Keller questions in his podcast series on ancient texts, and yes, again, I'm leaning heavily on Tim Keller. I love his messages, and I do appreciate them. He says this: have we really made progress in the last 100 years when it comes to having solved life and happiness? You see, our ancestors, they certainly had fewer choices than us. Most had little political freedom, no holidays, no health insurance, a short life expectancy. But are we living better than they did? Are we happier? Are we more fulfilled? I'm not so sure. Have we, with all these modern tools that we have now, have we actually made any progress at all? Sure, thanks to technology, we're physically safer. Thanks to medicine and medical research, we might be better off in certain areas. But we are currently in an age of great self-pity, anxiety, boredom, meaninglessness, and despair. I'm going to sidebar quickly. This is not a message that relates directly to depression and most mental health issues. I do believe it can speak into and to those struggling with mental health issues, but there's a place and often a very real need for therapy and for medication. And God has given us the blessing of doctors and therapists who have been bestowed with wisdom. Do not shy away from qualified counsel and medical care. But the Bible says that human fulfillment cannot be addressed by technology, psychology, political science, biochemistry, or AI. Whilst we have made the world more comfortable in many ways, I guess we've solved many social injustices, we've solved some social inequalities. But the Bible says that the secret to a great life, the thing that'll make you really happy, has remained unchanged for thousands of years. So here are 4 principles to living your best life now, taken from Psalm 1. Number 1, happiness is possible. Happiness is possible. Blessed means joyful, satisfied, content from the Amplified Version. Blessed, fortunate, prosperous, favored by God is the man. Blessed is the man. Happiness is possible. That's an incredible claim. That's a mind-blowing statement. Hey, as I said earlier, we start out thinking that happiness is natural. We end up believing that happiness is unachievable. There are 4 kinds of people, right? There's the first that think happiness is natural, a given, if you play your cards right. And those people are generally young or stupid. Then there's the second kind of person, and this is generally the great thinker, and they believe that happiness is unachievable. And then there's that group in between that hover, that kind of migrate between the 2 trains of thought, but they're so busy with life that they don't realize how tragic it is until it takes the legs out from under them. Then there's the 4th group of people, like this guy, who understands the Bible, Christ followers who believe in the Bible and understand that happiness is neither a given nor unachievable. It is possible in this life to be fundamentally happy and a consistently content person. Radical, right? That's radical. If it's possible, why do so few people have it? Well, because we look for it in the wrong places. The next 2 points are common mistakes that almost everybody makes unless God opens your eyes to them. Firstly, this blessing, this fullness of life, this happiness offered in the Bible that God offers is a primary, fundamental happiness, not a superficial happiness. You see, the passage tells us that this blessed guy is like a tree. And he will be like a tree, firmly planted and fed by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season. Its leaf does not wither, which yields its fruit in its season, but its leaf does not wither. You see, the tree is still vulnerable to the seasons. It's not always fruitful. It's not always blossoming. Winter or dry summer hits it like it hits any other tree. Those tough periods hit all the trees. It feels them. It's not always bearing fruit. It's not always productive. But this tree is not like other trees because it's got its roots planted on a riverbank. Its roots have access to a constant stream of water. The water's there even when the heat comes up. That's the image. What's the point? The first mistake that we make is we try and find our happiness in our circumstances. We think that happiness is found in the things that come to us like rain. The good stuff must just fall on us, that happiness happens to us. But the Bible says you seek your happiness or your satisfaction in external circumstances and you'll be bitterly disappointed. Real fulfillment is found underneath you. It's where you've sunk your roots and then it goes up through and it goes inside of you. Contentment is not based on what happens to you, what happens outside of you, but based on who you are on the inside. There's that old couplet, right? 2 men looked through prison bars. One saw mud and the other saw stars. Same window, different view. Circumstances are identical. The same place, They're looking through the same bars. Where's the difference? The difference is in the men. One looks down and the other looks up. Common sense. But you see, we're not all planted by the stream. The Bible says that a Christ follower, he's not just some religious person. He's not just some nice person. A Christian is someone who has been planted, been rooted in something other than himself or herself. We're taken from a dry place and we are planted into God. Something has planted you into a place where your roots reach streams of living water. And now there is a power, there's an outlook, there's an understanding that wasn't there before. And that's where you draw from. That's where happiness and contentment are found. It's foundational and it is fundamental. The tree experiences affliction. It hurts. It bends in the wind. It's affected by it. It doesn't always bear fruit, but its leaves never wither. There's always life in its leaves. 1 Peter 1 verse 6 says this, "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you've been suffering grief in all kinds of trials." Grief, mourning, distress, turmoil. It doesn't say you used to rejoice, but now you're suffering grief. It doesn't say avoid suffering grief. There are two present tenses here. You are in great joy, even though for a while you've had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. How? How? Well, here's a tree in a drought, not bearing fruit, grieved, but its leaves do not wither. Well, it's only because the roots are down into something else. I can't stand it when Christians say, "Oh, I see you've gone through something rotten, but you should have the joy of the Lord in you. You know, just smile and praise God." I did a video on depression many years ago, and I interviewed Bishop Frank Retief, who struggled for a period with pretty severe depression. And he said to me, when Christians in his church would say that kind of thing to him, he'd want to knock their heads off their shoulders. You can't be sad if you're a Christian, they'd say. Oh, you just can't let it get to you. Now, that's not only radically unbiblical, it's unbelievably unhealthy. If you find Christ followers going through tragedy without grief, without tears, without crumbling to the ground, that's not God's peace. That's not the kind of joy we're talking about. That's some kind of self-deception. The tree, because it's going through a dry season, must pull even harder from the stream below it. It must reach deeper. You must tap even more into God when times are tough, when you're going through the trials. Can we go so far as to say, you really don't know the joy of the Lord unless you know suffering? If you're a Christ follower, there's something about the dry seasons that makes you put your roots down deeper into Him in a way that you never did before. Happiness, as the Bible talks about, is a fundamental happiness. It's not a jovial, happy-go-lucky, carefree, fun, frolicking, kind of smiling all the time thing. No, those people are just irritating. We're talking about a joy that overwhelms. We're talking about a joy that runs in parallel to trials and to difficult circumstances. That's how you know if you have a circumstantial happiness or a fundamental happiness. As the bumper sticker used to say, stuff happens. It didn't really say that, but I'm not going to say what it actually says. But yes, in life, stuff happens. And you say, I believe the Bible. And you go to God, and you put your roots down into His Word and into His promises, and you begin to sense not a lack of pain, not a lack or the melting away of grief, but an overwhelming sense of glory and joy that comes from the inside, and it holds you up in spite of the grief. Your happiness is not based on circumstances. It's not brought about by controlling your world. It's by controlling where you sink your roots into. Number 3, happiness cannot be found by seeking to be happy. Happiness cannot be found by seeking to be happy. Everywhere in the Bible, if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, if you look at wherever it says blessed, and it says blessed all over the place. In fact, it's so obvious we miss it. It promises that being blessed is a byproduct of looking for something else. Being blessed is a byproduct of looking for something else. It never says, blessed is the one who seeks blessedness. Blessed is the one who hunger and thirsts for blessedness. No, you've got to hunger and thirst for something else. Something much more valuable than blessedness, if that's even a word. Hunger and thirst for righteousness, and you will be blessed. Ask yourself now, why am I not more content? Why am I not happier? Seek happiness or seek righteousness. What should you do? As Keller says, seek righteousness more than happiness, and you'll get both. Seek happiness more than righteousness, and you'll get neither. That's Psalm 1. The teaching of the text, you see, the one who is happy is the one who has stopped trying to be happy. The person who has, like Freddie Mercury, asked the question, what am I really living for? And looked in the right place for the answer and found the stream. Matthew 6, Jesus says, don't be anxious. Don't have anxiety about all these things, what you're going to eat, how you're going to live, who's going to pay the rent, what you're going to wear. Don't be anxious about these things, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. A couple important questions. Why do you sometimes cheat? Why do you sometimes lie? Think about it. Why do you break your promises? Why do you set New Year's resolutions or any standards for that reason and break them? You see, the natural inclination of our hearts is to say, I believe in principles. I believe in things like honesty and integrity and purity, but I have one overriding principle. One principle over all the others, and that is I've got to be happy. I believe in whatever it is, but not enough. Not enough to lose my job. Not enough to lose my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my reputation or my followers. Happiness comes first. Everything else is second or third. The Bible says that's the fundamental bent or bias of our hearts. You'll never find happiness by following your heart because the heart is deceitful above all things. Jesus says that if you seek happiness, it'll always escape you. It'll always elude you. Always. If you make having a happy marriage your number one priority in life, you'll never have one. If you make being successful in your career your number one priority, the anxiety is going to kill you. If you come to Jesus to make you happy, you're coming to a false God. If you're testing Christianity to see if it'll help you reach your goals for a comfortable and happy life, you're not looking for God, you're looking for a butler and a nurse. Either God exists or God doesn't exist. If he doesn't exist, you can't come to him to be happy. If he does exist, he's the creator of the heavens and the earth. He created absolutely everything. So when you come to him, you come to an absolute awe, saying, I owe you everything. Not to seek happiness. The only way to know which way you're coming to God is by assessing what happens in the bad seasons. When things go wrong, what do you say to God? Why did I become a Christian? Why do I even bother with church or reading the Bible or praying? But if you come with a hunger and a thirst for righteousness, regardless of what else you get out of life, you can't trick God here. God's the omniscient, all-knowing one. If you come with a genuine hunger and thirst for righteousness. You see, here's the irony. The less you're concerned about you and the more you're concerned about God, about him, the happier you'll be. Happiness is a byproduct. Finally, contentment is something you choose. Contentment is something you choose. Happiness is not something that happens to you. It is something that you choose. Psalm 1, it starts with the negatives, right? Blessed is the man who does not. There are three of them. Does not, does not, does not. Blessed is the man who does not. That means if you really want to be blessed, you need to see what you're doing wrong and make some changes to your life. There are verbs: to walk, to stand, to sit, Listen to the advice and the counsel of the ungodly. Those are considered to be the intellectuals. Walking. Who are you following in life, on social media? Who are the loudest voices in your ears? What do they stand for? So in effect, what are you standing for? Where are you sitting? Sitting in the seat of the scornful, in the seat of the mockers. In this Semitic language, where you sit is where you belong. All right? If you sit with the men, if you sit with the Greeks, if you sit with the Romans, if you sit with the kings, if you sit with the slaves, that's where you identify. That's where you belong. That's what the term sit means in this context. Who are you sitting with? Who do you belong to? You must find out who you belong to. At some point, you have to realize that something else owns you. Other things only own you. You need to be uprooted from whoever owns you, from wherever you're sitting, and you need to be replanted by streams of living water. Christ follows when Paul says, we're perplexed, but we are not driven to despair. We're struck down, but we are not crushed. You know what he's saying? He's saying, I'm like that godly man, and I'm subject to the seasons, but I've got my roots in a stream. Which means if you lose your job, if your wife serves you papers, if your dog, your friend, or your sister dies, are you supposed to be happy? No. Why should I not be downcast? Because these are the desires that God's given me. To be happily married, to be fruitful at work, to be a dog person, to absolutely love and adore my family. But Paul says there's a difference between wanting something and having it own you. Sitting in it, putting all your weight on it like you would a chair. If you're not a fundamentally happy person, what are you putting your weight on? What owns you? What really dominates your thoughts and your desires? What are the things you're listening to? Teenagers, young adults, you're smack bam in the most influential stage of your life. What are you absorbing, watching, allowing to preach to you, teach you on YouTube and on TikTok? They might well be robbing you of your happiness and stealing the very life from underneath you, making it a meaningless hour upon the stage, signifying nothing. You can't be happy unless you start with the nots. Not. I've got to turn away from things that have me by the heart, that have me by the mind. I've got to turn away from people that I belong to, that I identify with. I've got to remove the knots from my life. As a Christ follower, you're not fundamentally happy if you're sitting in somebody else's seat. If you're not just perplexed, but in despair. If you're not just hurting, but you're totally destroyed. Paul is not talking about some self-deception. I'm always happy and smiling. But he's also not talking about living in despair. He's struck down, but he's not crushed. Hey, Jesus cried a lot in the Bible. If you're watching the Chosen series like we are, we're almost at the end of season 4, and Tracy's like, Jesus cries a lot. Jesus cries a lot in the Bible. Crying is an outlet created by God for you and me to release emotions, and it's healthy. Mourning is good and right to do, but you can go through seasons of mourning and be fundamentally happy, holding on to an eternal perspective that breaks into the tragedy of the here and now and gives you a peace that surpasses all understanding. Jesus had a great peace. He had a perfect relationship with the Father, even though he was always crying. A man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. If you're living in despair, if life is not worth living, if you're being ruled by the knots, you're sitting in the wrong seat. But there's a positive, and I'm going to land with that now. Verse 2, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, and who meditates on his law day and night. The trouble with the phrase law of the Lord is it makes us think of the part of the Bible where all the rules are, right? But no, the phrase law of the Lord is not talking about a specific part of the Bible, but the whole message of the Bible as your rule for life. He's saying that he delights in the law of the Lord. He can't stop thinking about it all day, all night, all the time. He's meditating on it. We need to reclaim the term meditating. This isn't some sort of Eastern meditating where you try and empty your head of everything. This is about filling your head. What are you filling your head with? You're filling your head with the message of the Bible, with Bible verses, with worship. You're filling your mind thinking about who God is and what He's done. What is he meditating on? The essential message of the Bible, that this great, powerful Creator God sent His Son to die for us so that He can have a relationship with you, a relationship with me, and be your good Father. That relationship that Freddie Mercury missed out on. That perfect relationship that makes life abundant. Speaking of Freddie, the band can come up. Meditating brings an enormous sense of God's presence. Fix your mind on the truths and the promises of the Bible. Learn them, dwell on them. If you look carefully, it says he delights. What is delight? He finds happiness. He delights in the law of the Lord. How? Like a tree that puts its roots into water. What is the water? What is the stream? Well, the stream is the gospel message. It's the law of the Lord. We break the law. Right? As sinners, we break the law, but Jesus took the curse for us. We look at the law now, and instead of broken rules, we see Jesus who's justified us. That's how we can delight in the law of the Lord, because it's now the gospel. It's the good news. The law no longer has this never-ending despair attached to it. It's our salvation, and He's delighting in it day and night. That's why His leaves are always green, even in the heat. Do you know how to do that? Christ followers, can you do that? Can you think about the gospel until it makes the immediate pressures and stresses and anxieties fade away and your heart is overcome with peace? Do you know how to meditate on the word of the Lord, the word of God day and night? If you do, you'll be like Jesus, fundamentally happy, but always crying. Christianity makes you sadder and happier at the same time because it makes you more sensitive. People who don't know Jesus, they spend a lot of time and money trying to disguise, cover up, or deny how hard life is. Drugs, drink, work, sex, fame, admiration. When you become a Christian, you get that comfort that allows you to be honest about how tough life is. You feel the pain of the world even more than you did before. You feel the pain of the world, but you have a sense of knowing, of comfort, a peace. Your sins have been forgiven. They'll never be held against you. You'll eventually find eternal peace in the new heavens and the new earth, in the presence of God. That's what it means to be a Christian, and it comes by sinking your roots into the gospel and feeding off the streams of living water day and night. That's how you deal with the tragedies of life. So you can be happy. It is possible. Don't look for happiness in circumstances. Don't seek to be happy directly. Instead, look at what you're really living for. Accept and admit your need for the living water and sink your roots into the gospel of Jesus Christ. Delight in that day and night. If you're hurting, if you're in despair, you need it. Come and get it. Let's pray, and then we're going to go into a time of communion.